Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Ethocast. So there's this sister who I just had to get on this podcast, Phaith Frazier, also known as DJ Chocolate, or as my son said when he was a toddler, Chocolate, DJ Chocolate. so,
I like it.
so Phaith is somebody who a few years ago, I started noticing this activity on social media called Grown in Greek. And I'm going, ooh, what's that? Who's doing this? And it come to find out it's this sister. And so after getting to know her and really getting to understand how she rolls, and then she has this fantastic podcast called the Grown in Greek podcast. I have been fortunate enough to be a guest on it. But after listening to a couple of interviews and just watching what Phaith has been doing with great admiration, by the way, ma'am, I must say, I wanted to talk to you about this Grown in Greek movement. And so first things first, how and why did you even create the Grown in Greek concept? Where did it come from?
So, fun story. Traveling and looking around me, but basically just saw an opportunity to highlight culture and pride and, the contributions of alumni members of the D9 and, tell those stories. We haven't really seen stories told or imagery and things like that since the days of the Cosby Show and Like a Different World and even Living Single and everything, where you see nostalgic presence or whatever. And so through conversations and interviews, from travel, and then, me being a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, and putting together a weekend of activities where we got like a community, got our community together to celebrate with the weekend of activities. The concept became a brand, and it's thriving, and people appreciate it, thankfully, like you do, and just get a chance to do something fun and contribute to the positivity that the alumni Greeks are doing in the world.
That's really interesting that you saw this opportunity to highlight the alumni of the D9. But did that kind of come out of frustration, or did you just say, or did you keep running across these stories where you say, man, this is a dope story. Somebody needs to tell this story. How did it come about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Me being a DJ, you mentioned that. I've been able to travel, thankfully. It's been a cool ride, but traveling different places and different gigs and things that I had, you always see somebody Greek. And, they don't have to be an AKA, it could be an Omega, it can be an Alpha or whatever. And, just having a conversation, you get to know people, and it's like, man, you're doing some good stuff. Like, are you telling anybody about it? And so my background is in radio. And so I instantly, I guess gravitate to an opportunity to talk to people, but also, trying to figure out ways to tell other folks about stuff, tell stories. And so, yeah, just, discovering what people are doing. It's like, you need to tell people about what you're doing, because do they know? Like, you are just awesome, and people need to celebrate you. And that's pretty much how it came about.
And you know what? We're not used to celebrating ourselves, are we? I mean, because
No.
because in D9 Greek life, I think, well, actually, I think among Black folks, I think we have this thing where we are constantly telling each other, don't you get too big. Don't you think you're too this. Don't you think you're too that. And so when it comes time for us to celebrate ourselves, a lot of us, we have a tendency, I think, to shrink ourselves to fit into groups when honestly, we need to be as big as we are and bring people with us. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love this. I love this thing that you notice where people need to tell their stories, and we
Yeah,
need to talk about the stuff that we're doing. Um,
absolutely. And I mean, there are people from all walks of life that, we need each other, right? And
yeah.
so, anytime, it's bigger than networking. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's bigger than networking, because somebody can connect you with someone that is not a direct line to what you need. But if, those stories and those people are out front more, you have a direct line to them. You can
Mhm.
say, hey, I saw this interview with Eddie Francis, and, he's this mad marketing guru or whatever. I'm going to hit him up. Well, somebody might know you, right? And know how to get to you. But because your story is out there on Front Street, through the podcast or whatever, people have a direct line to you and they know instantly how to get to you, and, all of that stuff. And so that was the goal and the mission, to make sure that people are out on Front Street and you're celebrated, but also people know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, and I one of the things I really love and respect about you is I can tell that radio background. I mean, that's something you and I have. We have a bunch of things in common. I mean, but
Yeah,
one of
we
the
do.
things that I really like is that I can hear that radio skill set. And people don't think about what we do in radio as a skill set.
Yeah.
And I was actually telling Phaith right before we started the interview, I was like, you have a talent for extracting the brilliance from the people you interview. You made me sound like I knew what I'm talking about. And so,
You do know. You do.
but I mean that how do you do that? I mean, I was joking with you about one of my friends. I was like, man, he sounded so polished. I know this dude. So how what is it about you when you interview people you are able to extract the brilliance from them so that they can tell their story in this robust way?
Well, I'm Eddie, to be honest, because I'm genuinely interested in knowing about people,
Ding ding ding, there we
and it's
go.
crazy because I'm really an introvert. I really am, but I
Makes
love
sense.
information. I love learning. I love knowledge, and love connecting, connecting the dots and
Hmm.
planting seeds, if you will. And so I also have a background in theater, and so I've studied
Another
theater and
connection
everything.
point,
And
me
one of
too.
the another connect yeah, and so one of the techniques is, in theater, you got to listen. So you don't listen to respond, you listen to genuinely engage in dialogue,
Yep.
and that makes the conversation or whatever you're acting or the scene real. And so I really take that to heart, and I try to present that in interviews, if you will, and really, just have a conversation with folks. But really, genuinely, I'm interested in what they have to say and what they're about and who they're about, and hope that I can learn something that I didn't know in my research, but also hopefully it's an aha moment for them to say, hey, yeah, I need to tell my story more because that's pretty good. But yeah,
So,
that's pretty much it.
all right. So you're gonna make me geek out on something in theater because I was a
Okay.
theater minor in college. Okay, so
Were you?
I was a
Okay.
mass comm major, theater minor. And
Okay.
so you're going to make me geek out because I remember the day that I was rehearsing for a play and a director said, Eddie, I can see you thinking about your line while the other character is talking. And you reminded me of that.
Yeah.
And you just made me realize that one of the biggest skill sets that you do pick up as an actor is listening
Hmm.
because you can't be thinking about your line while the other character is doing their line. You actually have to listen to that character's line so that you can deliver your line much more authentically.
Yeah.
And so I remember this one play I did where every night I had to figure out how to not become robotic about my lines. And so I had to find something new about the person who played opposite me. I had to find something new to react to in their lines every single night for like four
Hmm.
nights in a row. And so you just reminded me what a valuable skill set that is. Not, I mean, especially professionally, but it's a great life skill to
Yeah.
actually figure out how to shut your mouth and to go ahead and open up your mind and don't worry about what you're saying. Listen to what the other person is saying, so that what you're saying can be much more authentic. So, golly, man, you really took me back on that one,
theater
man.
theater theater and that training was and still I don't train like I should. I need to get back into it, but those techniques and those tools are just, when you like you said, you can use them in your everyday life. Like, it is legit, because art imitates life.
Yeah.
It truly does. And if you really take it to heart and take it seriously, you you remain present,
Hmm.
more. Yeah.
Yeah. You're listening to Ethocast. I'm Eddie Francis. We're talking to Phaith DJ Chocolate Frazier. She's the host of the Growing in Greek podcast. And so one of the things that you and I talked about when you interviewed me is, at one point we had a conversation about the Divine Nine developing leaders, for community action, for community leadership. And so we talked a little bit about pooling resources, what that could look like, if I remember correctly. But I wanted to ask you, based on the interviews that you have had with folks on Grown in Greek and the conversations that you've had with folks over the course of the years, all these professionals, all these people from the Divine Nine doing cool stuff. We tend to do a lot of our stuff in silos. So for you, all the data that you've collected over all these years, how do you envision the Divine Nine pooling resources for community progress?
It's a big task.
Yeah.
It's a big task, but my, I guess, ultimate way to be able to say that, you know, this is my contribution, is to utilize the platform. So Grown in Greek is on all podcast platforms. It's on YouTube as well, and then we'll have a website. But from any area, uh, I want the platform to be a one-stop shop. So whether there's a farmer who
Mm.
has beef, whether there's a minister, who has done some international work with, doing things in other countries and supplying resources to other countries, whether there's, a person with a nonprofit who is building libraries and resources for children. I want the platform and for Grown in Greek to be a place that houses your one-stop shop full of resources and people who are
Mm.
doing the work in those areas that you can go directly to get answers and things that you need to do whatever you want to do. And so we are doing that work and finding, people who are on the ground and who are passionate about, um, the serious part of what we vowed to do.
Mhm.
And that's what I envision, happening years from now. We're just getting started with the podcast and really figuring out how to, um, centralize everything.
Mhm.
But so far, finding those, not so front and center people, who are doing those things has been a great reward, and something that I'm slowly but surely, kind of putting those, like you always want to put the right pieces in the holes,
Yeah.
to fill
Yeah.
those gaps and those voids and stuff. And so that's what I envision. That's what I envision.
I just thought about something as I was listening to you. What do you think of the criticisms that we often hear about D9 alumni Greeks, that we simply don't do enough? What comes to mind when you hear people say that, especially when it comes to folks who are not members of the D9, but including those of us in the D9, when we get frustrated and say, "Oh, we just don't do enough. We don't do enough." What do you think when you hear that?
I just think they are unaware. They're ignorant to
Mm,
it, because, and maybe that's a testament to, you know, us, collectively or whatever, not telling our stories
mm,
well enough, because it's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true that we don't do enough. We
mm,
do. It's I think it's just we don't have, enough platforms to make sure that those stories are told, and those high level highlight moments are put out there. Because I see things every day in the
mm.
community, and it's because, I'm tapped in, if you will. But you do a general search, and people are really doing some great work. Now, the other part of that is we don't wear our letters, all the time in professional settings, or, everywhere we go. And we're not supposed to, you know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be, uh, we don't have to wear it all the time. But I don't think, like I said, have enough platforms out there to tell those stories. So yeah, that whole, idea that we're not doing enough is, I don't think it's true at all. I think we are. I think we're doing more than people realize that we're doing.
I'm going to ask you a really unfair question.
Okay.
What would be your definition of enough?
Um, my definition of enough. That's a great question. Fruit, you know, the production of fruit, I think is
Mm,
enough.
hmm.
And once harvests are generated, they always reproduce, because
Mm.
those seeds are always there. But I think, yeah, the enough part is evident because of the fruit that is born from that.
Yeah, I think, I think about, so you and I, one thing we have in common, we were both initiated at predominantly white institutions.
Hmm.
You were initiated at University of Montevallo, literally middle of Alabama.
Yeah.
I was initiated at Loyola University, New Orleans. And I always think about the D9 Greeks who I saw on campuses, and I was almost one of them, but I always think about, particularly at PWIs, when you have somebody who is a chapter president, but they're also an SGA. They're also vice president of the community service organization of the university. They're also the president of the Black Student Union. They're also involved in this. And you have this one person who is spread so thin, because I do think in those cases, sometimes we tell ourselves, and this is where I feel bad for some of our college members. I do think that they feel that they're not doing enough a lot of times, and they have this idea of perfectionism, and so they feel they have to keep doing stuff and keep doing stuff. And this poor kid is burned out, right? By the time they hit junior year, they're burned out. And you look at those types of people, and we see it again in professional lives, right? Where somebody is, I don't know, they're the chief of police, but they're still active in their frat chapter, and they still find time to go do that. They're a CASA volunteer, or I don't know if that can happen, but they're volunteering for these different things. They already have a big professional responsibility, but they give up a lot of time to their church. They give up a lot of time to community service, and somebody goes to them and says, "Well, you don't do enough," and they're thinking to themselves, "I'm not doing enough. I got to do more." And so those are the kinds of people I think about when you gave your last answer. Um, who I think we can say professionally, this person is bearing fruit.
Hmm.
Community, they're bearing fruit. They're bearing fruit in their faith practice because they're always present in church or temple or synagogue or wherever they are, or they are they are always present. They're always doing something. Yet, and they're the ones who just happen to have a big sexy title. We're not thinking about somebody who works customer service somewhere and they're doing the same thing. They're very active in the frat sorority chapter. They are very active raising money for the gala so that students can have scholarships. They're raising money for March for Babies. They're the ones who, you can always depend on these people to be there. And they start to hear, well, y'all aren't doing enough. And so that I thought about those types of people when you said what you just said about people about bearing fruit, and that's what enough looks like. And I do think that's a conversation for us to have within a D9 about what it does look like for us to talk about what we do more without it looking braggadocious, without it looking like just gaudy or crazy or something like that. I think there's a lot to chew on right there. I really appreciate your outlook on that, because I was just curious about what you thought, especially as someone who has gotten the opportunity to talk to so many D9 Greeks. And so I definitely appreciate your outlook on that.
And like the thing is, of the people that I've talked to, they're subject matter experts because they honed in on something that they're passionate about, but also something that they're good at, but mainly because they saw things being produced from the work that they're doing. And so I yeah, you're right, and I've been guilty of this in my life, and trying to figure things out and everything, just being busy. But that doesn't mean that you're being purposeful, and it doesn't mean that you're being productive. But
Yeah.
when you do stop sometimes, and somebody can say, hey, I really appreciate you because man, you helped me this, and I get this more now than I ever have in my life. And maybe it's because I've been in so many settings. But a lot of people have come to me and say, well, Phaith, I remember when you said this to me, or when you hooked me up with this, or when you did this for me, or whatever. And I'm like, man, really? And I'm just going on my way. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
that let me know that the seeds that I was planting were bearing fruit.
Yeah.
And that means so much. But yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm doing enough because something is happening. Something is happening from whatever I did or said or whatever. And that's so joyful to know and to experience.
You're listening to Ethocast. I'm Eddie Francis. We're talking to Phaith Frazier, DJ Chocolate, and she is the host of the Grown and Greek podcast. And I have got to ask, what have you learned from your membership as a good sister of Alpha Kappa Alpha? Um, what have you learned from your membership that has been really good for you personally and professionally?
Well, first things first, it was one of the best decisions that I've ever made in my life. Not just because, being a member of AKA, it was the right decision for me to join that organization. Nothing against any of the other D9 organizations, because I think they're wonderful. But being a member of a collective group of individuals who are, professional, who are experts, who believe in excellence, who carry themselves with dignity and respect, who demand presence, was one of the best decisions of my life. What I've also learned from it is that there's nothing greater than to work and be in communion with people that look like you, who share the same values, who want the same things, and who are striving to do the greatest work possible to make the world a better place. Um, on a professional tip, I wouldn't have the career and wouldn't have had the career, I'll say it like that I've had it not been for one of my sorority sisters, who became a mentor and ultimately became a great friend. She gave me my first job in radio, and it sparked everything, everything that you see to this day. So that connection was the reason why I became DJ Chocolate, who I, became a radio personality that introduced me to all these wonderful people that I know or whatever to this day. So it has been, like I said, the absolute greatest decision. And then on top of that, to be a part of a legacy of individuals who have shaped, not only firsts that have come, in this world, but you cannot take those things away, and our names will be written down in the history books for perpetuity, and as people who, shaped what brilliance and excellence is all about.
Mm. So I cracked a joke with Halima once, and I said, I think one of the things that has always taken root with me in my process is the simple phrase, "I'll find out," as
Okay.
opposed to "I don't know." and it is, and I remember the day we went over that, and I was like, "Oh, really, y'all? Seriously?" I mean, and this is, we're talking 1989, so I was number one. I was swing swim number one, standing online, on the yard, and it's just like, Swinksman, don't you ever say, "I don't know." Say, "You'll find out." And I was like, what's the difference? But I can't tell you how many times that saying, "I'll find out" versus "I don't know" has rescued me, either
Mhm.
personally or professionally. Not because I was able to get away from something or with something, but because it shifted my mentality
Mm.
to being a bit more proactive,
Mhm.
and to being much more solutions focused. And that's one of the that's one of the it's funny how I think about the simple things that I have taken with me in my career and personally from becoming a member of a fraternity, that I never thought it would make a difference. I never thought it would be that big a deal. And for what you just said, I think there's something that we miss out on. And I do think we miss out on, well, I don't think we miss out on it. I don't think you sound like you were very intentional about understanding legacy and whose shoulders you stood on. And I think we miss out on that intention, not the legacy part, but really being intentional about the legacy. And when we think about that, here's what I would love to know from you. Again, as somebody who's gotten this opportunity to talk to so many cool people in the D9, so many cool alumni, so many accomplished alumni, what do you see us doing to help generate, to help cultivate the next generation of truly effective leaders, whether they're D9 or not?
Mhm.
But with the D9 having something to do about it, to cultivate the next generation of truly effective leaders, how do you see us doing that, especially based on the people you've met and the conversations you've had with people? What does the future look like? Please get your crystal ball.
So I mean, I think we need to be just intentional, more intentional. One of the things, that as far as AKA goes, we, have a motto that says we help each other. And, when you really think about it and break that down, it's absolutely true.
Mm,
You can't get to the next part of your journey without someone's help. I believe, yeah, to a certain degree that, you can be self-made this or self-made that, but come on.
no, but
you
are we
know,
really?
no, you're
Are
not.
we? We're
Like,
not. We're
you're
not.
not. You have to have the help from someone else. And so, whether it's, young folks, I'll say this, next generation, they don't know what they don't know, but
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
before them knows. So if you see an opportunity, because there's an opportunity every time you go out your door to, speak life, to mentor, to correct, to advise, whatever, the next generation. I think especially members of the D9, you have an obligation to help someone and to help each other. And then on top of it, your brother or sister, regardless of affiliation, regardless of organization that they're in, you have an obligation to help, because you know something or have something that they need. And
Mm,
it could be something simple, you know, what's up? I see you don't, your energy is off. Let's talk. You know, you having a hard time? Okay, I ain't got a lot, but what I got, you got. Little things like that, I think, will help to not only show an example of what leaders for the next generation should be about, but it will, drive that thought of intentionality. And I think, that's what's missing. Like you said, we do operate in silos, but when you really think about it, yeah, you are a member of your organization, but you are a member of the Divine Nine. And
yeah.
we're members of a collective, and we're members of something bigger than ourselves. And so, in order to make sure that things continue for the next generation when we're long dead and gone, like our founders. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know the impact that they were going to have, but it was intentional. It was intentional, and it was written, and it was stamped, and they went through all of the processes and procedures to ensure that something was sustained for us. And so I
Mm,
think that we, as members now, need to really be intentional about, going back to what I was saying about planting seeds. Intentionally plant whatever seed you are called upon to do when you step out your door every day. And if you really want to be intentional, make sure that you do that. So say, okay, I'm on my way to work today. I got to stop for gas. Well, I'm going to make sure that I see somebody or meet somebody, and I'm going to say something to them. Or, hey, I got a
mm,
little extra money on my check or whatever. I'm going to buy somebody's gas or buy somebody a coffee. I'm going to go buy, the doctor's office or something, and make sure I say thank you for the great service that, somebody gave. So I think you have to just be intentional about everything that you
mm.
do. And by your example, that's going to show others how to lead, and not necessarily follow. You're always doing something that sets you apart.
Mm. You really, really believe strongly in a human connection, don't you?
Um, I do. I do, but I believe that have to be you have to, like, you have to listen to, and be led,
Yeah.
to do that. I do. Everybody's not for you. Everybody's not your, what's the word that they say, it's not your ministry, or it ain't your
Yeah.
calling. Everybody's not your calling. You ain't supposed to save them or nothing like that. But I do believe that you have an opportunity all the time to be called upon and answer the call. I do that, believe that.
Well, the dog believes in the connection as well, as you might hear in the background.
I have three, so mine are behaving today. Thank God.
Oh, goodness. Oh, bless you and bless them. Good pups. Good job, pups. All right. So, when people want to find out more about you, how can they find out more about you?
So I am easily found. I think I'm on all social media platforms as DJ Chocolate. So on IG, which is where I prefer to engage, I guess, is djchocolate.com. You spell the DOTCOM. Facebook, same thing. And also Grown and Greek podcast. So you can find that on all social media platforms. Of course, please listen. We're on all podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcast, you can watch full episodes on YouTube. You can also DM me. That's cool. DJchocolate.com or at Grown and Greek podcast. And I'm not hard to find. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So you can check me out on LinkedIn. So yeah, just look for DJ Chocolate and the Big Fro, and you got me.
Yep. And Faith's information is also in the show notes. My sister, thank you so much
Thank
for a
you.
great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it very much.